Hi, good morning, everybody. It's my turn to welcome everyone to the Oregon Active Transportation Summit. I want to thank everybody for sticking around to join us for this really important community roundtable. So earlier, a few moments ago, we heard from transit officials from across the state speak to challenges and visions for the future of transportation here in Oregon. But as we know, there can be a real gap sometimes between the visions we hear espoused by officials and the needs of communities on the ground. Some hard questions that come up for me reflecting on that first panel is, if we are going to talk about public transit as the vital thread that connects our communities, why are we entertaining conversations around increasing fares instead of seizing the opportunity of making transit more resilient to things like the pandemic and going fareless as so many other cities have done, right? The tools and templates for this are out there. And as someone who works with transit riders on a daily basis, I can say with confidence that that is something that the community needs and is advocating for. And another important question around safety is, how are we reimagining public safety without perpetuating systems of harm against marginalized people? I'm also reflecting on the last time I was on a stage here at the Street Trust. I was a rider ambassador with the Portland Streetcar, and I told this room that this is our city, these are our streets and our people, and our transit system belongs to us as well. And I do believe that we can work better together to deliver a just, equitable, and multimodal future that our region needs and that future generations deserve. So to help elevate the voices of community in these ongoing and hard conversations, I'd like to welcome a panel of very wonderful people who are doing amazing work on the ground. So panelists, I'm gonna move over to the table here. Panelists, I would like us to kind of introduce ourselves, names, pronouns, and affiliations. And if you can, when you introduce yourself, just to kind of establish a personal connection as to why we're all here, can you also share a core memory related to active or public transit that kind of underscored the importance for you of a multimodal system? So I'm realizing I didn't give myself a full introduction, so I'll start us off, and then Andre, we can kind of work back this way towards me. So good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Josh Laurente, he, him. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Manager at OPAL Environmental Justice. If you're not familiar with our work, we amplify and activate community members to be at tables where decisions are being made that affect our ability to have an environmentally just future. And I think one core memory that I would like to kind of share with you all is when I moved to Portland a decade ago as a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed college freshman, one of the things that we did during orientation week was learn how to ride the TriMet system. We looked at maps, we looked at how to look up schedules and things like that. And my workshop leader got us on the 44 bus to downtown and walked us to Voodoo Donuts in Old Town, because as a first-time Portlander, that's what you do, I guess, right? And halfway through breakfast, my workshop leader kind of was like, all right, I taught you how to use the system. It's up to you now to get back to campus on your own. So I explored downtown, was hopping on the Max, on the buses, was kind of exploring the city. And eventually I found my way back to campus on the 35 bus. And my dad called me that night and he said, Josh, I want to set aside a little bit of money to help you buy a used car to help you get around your new city. And I said, Dad, you've done enough for me already. And there's no need to worry about a used car because TriMet is driving. And that has been true for me for the whole 10 years that I've called Portland home. I'm a daily transit rider, pedestrian, and have been able to navigate this city and learn to come to learn and love this city through the transit lines that connect us all. So that's kind of my story and connection as to why I'm here. And Andre, I'll turn it over to you for introductions and your core memory.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Andre Lightsey-Walker. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Planning and Programs Manager at the Street Trust. So wanted to just welcome you all again to this wonderful summit. As I'm sort of reflecting on a core memory, I think it's actually a collection of memories. So I actually texted my mom this morning and I asked her, was I riding the bus? Like, when did I start riding the bus? And she actually told me that she has been riding TriMet since before I was born, when she was pregnant with me, actually. And so I sort of have grown up on the transit system, and just seeing her as a single mother, that was quite literally transit dependent, navigate the system with such grace was really inspiring and sort of has always impacted the way I think about transit in this region. Hopefully that answers everything. Awesome.
I guess I'm up next.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out today. My name's Claire Roth, she, her pronouns. I am program manager with Better Eugene-Springfield Transportation, or BEST for short. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. So from the get-go, I think, I was raised in a really multimodal family. My dad was very instrumental in bikes, currently volunteers in the San Francisco Bike Kitchen, for those of you who are familiar with that. And I kind of followed suit, seeing bicycles and later transit as a form of freedom. I grew up on a dead-end street, which basically meant there was either the end of the street or Highway 1 down at the bottom there. But there was also very conveniently a bus stop for Samtrans. Samtrans took me right to BART. BART took me right to the city, and the rest was history in terms of what San Francisco had to offer me growing up. So yeah, really appreciate it.
My name is Meg Niemi. I'm the president of SEIU Local 49. We're the Service Employees International Union. We represent about 15,000 janitors, security officers, hospital and healthcare workers in Oregon and Southwest Washington. My pronouns are she, her. And I grew up in Oregon and came to Portland to go to Jefferson High School in the 80s. And in the 80s, we were building the MAX infrastructure, and our downtown was really in a really challenging period of time as we transitioned from a timber economy to more of the economy that you see today. And my only form of transportation was TriMet. My parents were not available to me to be able to give me rides. So I rode TriMet, and back then we had the OWL bus that ran at night. And so, there might have been some times where I was staying at a friend's house, but we were riding the bus all night. And up to high school hijinks. But learning to ride TriMet around the Portland area has allowed me to be able to navigate cities all over the world in public transportation from having that experience.
Hi, my name is Renato Quintero. I am original from Mexico. My experience with the transit system, with the public system, is that I had to use it for work. I've been here in the Portland area for about 20 years. I live in Hillsboro. And before, I used to live in Corvallis, and I lived there for about 10 years. And it's a small city where everybody either use bicycle or walk. Those who have no car, it's small. So for me, it was kind of challenging when I got here, because I thought I want to be forced to buy a car or to drive, because it's a big city, and wherever I need to go to work, I had to drive, and that was a problem for me, because I have a condition that make it unsafe for me to drive. So to use to have this kind of public transit is really good. I'm really happy with that, because tell me wherever I need to go in the Portland area without the need to drive, and that is something that I found this city is wonderful in that sense, because either the weather is a challenge, or whatever else, we had always a bus or a train line that we can go, that we can connect.
Wonderful, thank you. Andre, Claire, Meg, Renato, thank you all for sharing those stories and for sharing your perspective with the audience today. Thank you so much. Yeah. Well. Awesome, thank you. So we heard a lot in that first panel about the impact of the pandemic, and here we are sitting in person, maskless, no camera toggling, no mute button to turn on and off, right? So as we think about how we enter this new normal, right? Like we're not, I try not to subscribe to the narrative of going back to normal. We're entering a new normal. So as we think about the pandemic and this new normal, how has this experience over the last 2-3 years informed the community priorities that shape our work? So Andre, we'll start with you and we'll work down this way. But yeah, just thinking about like what sort of changes are you hearing from community members in regard to a multimodal system that has come out of the last few years? What are priorities you're hearing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, what I think I've been sort of most excited about is sort of emerging options. I don't know about you all, but I was afraid to ride transit from like a COVID perspective, right? When it immediately happened, right? I was afraid of getting sick. And so that actually pushed me, who was a daily transit commuter, away from using our transit system. Well, what I've been excited about is sort of the emergence of modal options for people. I feel really privileged in the sense that when that did happen, I had the ability to shift to a different mode. Shout out Biketown for offering a low income program that allows, that's really, my mode switched over. I was like, hey, I still don't want to drive places, but I have the option to try a mode that gets me where I need to go affordably. And so I think affordability is something that's also emerged. Is like we need to ensure that people not everyone can afford to drive. So we need to ensure that people have a wide range of options that are affordable and reliable. And I think that's a conversation that's still taking place.
Yeah, so speaking from the Eugene-Springfield County area, and I also just want to say, I don't think I mentioned this about BEST, we're a 501c3 educational nonprofit. Surprise, surprise, we work in transportation safety and advocacy. But from the Springfield County perspective, people need dependable, fast, comfortable transit that's also affordable. I've been really excited to see more options coming to the scene, just kind of like what you were saying. We had e-scooters hit the road on March 31st. Very excited about that. I tried the Biketown bike here yesterday for the first time, and I couldn't stop smiling. Shout out to Jack with Springfield Safe Routes to School who convinced me to do it. I was a little bit afraid, but then I just my cheeks were hurting. I was smiling so much. It was a fun time. Which, the way I look at transit and a well-functioning transit system is it's an indicator species of a healthy transportation system as a whole, right? So if we see a transit system that's working well, that means we're also going to see pedestrian and bicycle networks that should be working well. And, I'm gonna come out and say I want vehicle miles traveled to be an afterthought. I want it to be so easy and so obvious that the bus is the way to go, that, maybe someday people are going to demand bus lanes instead of demanding that they be taken out or demanding that they don't happen at all. My favorite new acronym, and I'm scrolling through my notes here because I always get it wrong, is BANANAS. Build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. So I really want people to stop going bananas because that's been happening a lot locally. But yeah, in terms of what's coming next for transit, it's part of the transportation pie that I think, if baked right, will be really delicious.
Loving these the analogies that are happening. I think that we saw through the pandemic, our members are all essential workers, a new term that was really coined during the pandemic, and they still are. And they didn't miss a shift at work. Instead, they picked up overtime and extra shifts, and they were there cleaning buildings and keeping those buildings safe. They were there taking care of patients. They were there at the airport. And so when we think about our transit system, and Renato will talk more about his experience too, riding through the pandemic and needing to rely on that, I think, we have a desire to make sure that we're supporting our transit structures for workers and the people that we rely on to get to work. And I appreciated earlier was talked about the people that keep the lights on. And how do we also make sure that right now working people are really stretched thin? We've seen that inflation has taken a big bite out of people's take-home pay and the skyrocketing cost of rent and the need to move further and further out of our cities, which makes for longer commutes, however you're getting there. Those are all real things. And so how do we make sure that employers who need folks to come to work are actually providing transit as part of people's employment packages. So it's just not even a question of, is it cheaper to ride the bus, or is it cheaper for me to ride to work with a coworker or carpool in? So those are some of the things that we look at coming out of this pandemic that we hope will be happening more.
Yeah, the pandemic was a challenge for me. It made a lot of my co-workers. We ended up being like, I work as a janitor in Intel in Hillsborough, and we become essential workers. We cannot abandon the building because they need us. But the changes that they were making on the buses for the distance and everything, they were good, but that also the capacity of the amount of people that they can carry on those buses was limited. So what happened? They get full because they only can sit in every other seat, and they cannot pick us. We had to wait to the next bus to go to work, and the bus, our manager or supervisor don't recognize that like something that we can justify. Like, okay, I'm late because there was no bus were able to pick it up to take it at time. No, I was late anyway. So and the same happened with the train. The train was only half of those cars were seat that we were allowed to sit. So the frequencies, all those were really challenging. And besides, I was so afraid of being sick, get sick. And my family depends on me, and I saw people around me getting sick. And that was really not a pleasant time, when we really struggle to keep working and mentally be focused on, okay, I had to, every day I had to get up and go to work, and I hope when I come back, I don't feel sick. And unfortunately, I was able to go to those times without being sick, but many other people get sick, They were not that lucky.
Yeah, thank you all. Wow, there's so many great insights from this one question. And yeah, just thinking about how we move from a car-centric history to a multimodal future with mobility options that give us the flexibility to make choices that support each other's public health and looking out for each other, and making sure that multimodal future also serves the essential workers who by necessity just had to keep riding, and the people who prevented ridership numbers from falling lower than we've already seen them fall. I mean, a lot of great insights in there. Thank you all for sharing that. Pivoting now to another theme that we heard from this morning, a theme around public safety and safety in and around the transit system. I hold the perspective that, everyone is entitled to public safety, operators, riders, bystanders, pedestrians. Like, we are all entitled to keep to public safety, and it's up to all of us to keep each other safe. And for me, thinking about the racial justice reckoning that followed the police murder of George Floyd, I'm constantly asking myself, safety how and safety for whom? I think those questions should underlie the conversations that we're having in this space. And so I want to pivot the question to all of us, because there are many different angles we can take to the safety question. So we'll keep the same question order. So how are conversations around safety manifesting in your communities or with your members? Like, how is that conversation coming up, and what priorities or needs are you hearing expressed?
That's a great question. I think I actually want to start with a personal example of safety, if that's okay. If you didn't realize, I'm a young Black man in Portland, Oregon. And so you may have an idea of where safety concerns actually emerge for me. The scaredest I've ever been in a transit situation was actually being followed by an officer in a situation where I did evade fare. Sorry, TriMet. I was in between jobs, and people do what they need to do to get where they need to go. But but having an encounter with a individual who has the ability to shoot me on sight is a pretty jarring experience, and certainly more scary than any situation I've ever experienced just riding the bus, you know, with someone that's having maybe a mental health issue, so or challenge. So safety is a huge consideration. I think it's a very dynamic subject because safety is subjective, and the things that make people feel unsafe are different. So there may be someone that could be riding transit where the most unsafe they feel is sitting in proximity to me, right? That could be their determination of what's unsafe. So yeah, I think that's just a conversation, something we need to think through and think about whose safety we are prioritizing. I think to be very clear about that and working as a community to define sort of the baseline of what safety means on transit.
Thank you for sharing that. That's, you know, really tough to hear those kind of things, but they're out there and it's happening probably right now to someone riding the bus. Or walking down the sidewalk existing. Transportation is interdisciplinary, right? So improvements at the source, especially around safety, is not the only work to be done in terms of our community, thinking about it in an ecosystem kind of way. We need improvements in housing, equity work, and that's equity around racial and queer justice. We need equal pay, the list goes on and on and on, right? These things, though not directly, do have an impact on transit safety and the functioning of transportation systems as a whole. Transportation often presents itself as a wicked problem, which is a problem that's usually social or cultural, that's challenging to solve because it's either not understood enough about the problem, or number of stakeholders involved is not enough or not broad enough. Number of varying opinions. Everybody has a different opinion and many opinions. And the economic burden and on and on. So this is why we need an interdisciplinary approach to safety and problems around transit as a whole, because just throwing one solution at it in terms of like a one size fits all is not going to work, especially depending on who you are. Your definition of what is safe and what is unsafe does vary. And I also just want to note something that I learned from a colleague of mine, that the perception of danger is just as powerful as whether or not there's actually a danger. So the perceived danger for different folks, and I'm talking about mostly bike path usage at this point, and I'll try not to go too much into the bike side of things. That you know has an effect on how people will use different modes just as much as anything else.
Thanks. I want to just totally add to the fact that I think the issue of safety is multifaceted, and we can't just look at it in one, are you safe on a bus, are you safe on TriMet? I think there are a lot of issues that need addressed around safety to make all of us feel safer using public transit and other modes of transportation besides cars. I want to reiterate that our members are, a number of them are Black, Indigenous, people of color, and they are profiled for fair enforcement, profiled in a number of ways, and that's added to in and around public transit. And so that's one of the ways that they don't feel safe. I think that another issue around safety is, I think about one of our members, Adela Matza, and she's a janitor who cleans buildings at night downtown Portland. And you know, we've partnered with OPAL to try to increase the number of transit opportunities that are there at night when workers get off work. So when Adela gets off work and she's off shift and it's hours until there's another bus for her to get home, that's an issue of safety. And there used to be some places open 24 hours a day downtown, and now that's not even true, right? So that's an issue of safety and a reason that we need more around the clock transportation. And then we have to slow cars down in and around the metro area. It is not safe. And this is something that's very personal for me, so give me a second here, but our union in particular has been impacted. Just in the last year, we've had the experience where my son was crossing Powell Boulevard on August 16th on his bicycle in a crosswalk and was run over by a vehicle and nearly killed. And he was doing everything right, and he survived and is doing wonderful now, but his life will be forever changed. But it didn't stop there. We had another janitor member of ours, a Burmese refugee who cleans buildings at Portland State University, waiting for the bus to get to work, and she was run over and killed by a car on 162nd. Our office is at the corner of 26th and Powell, where Sarah Pleiner was murdered, run over by a truck. And another member of ours who works at Kaiser Permanente's mother was killed as a pedestrian crossing division. That's just people I know of in my small community. So we have to work together to make it so people who are walking and biking feel safe getting to and from transit.
In my experience for the last 4 or 5 years, I have been see how the housing crisis is are impacting also the public transportation. You know, I understand. I have a lot of sympathy for all those people who have no place to live. But in many of the stations, especially in winter, a lot of homeless use the bench to sleep, like has their bedroom, and those who ride the bus waiting for the bus for the train. Sometimes we have to wait on the rain because it's the area that is for waiting is occupied for somebody, and the same thing happened even on the trains. A lot of people who don't sleep during the night because they have no place, they take the train and go to sleep there. So when the housing situation get resolved, we're going to be, improvement on that kinds of situations where everybody deserves to have a place to live, where they can, have their own place to sleep without using or impacting other people's, we are in our way to work. And in general, the other thing that really worries me is the violence that is sometimes happen on those train stations, because there is a lot of people with mental issues that have been attacking others, people who are either waiting for the train or get out for the train. That was something that I don't even think. Usually I just get out of the train and don't think about nothing of that, or get on the bus and it was not in my mind. Now it's in my mind, because I see it happen more often.
Yeah, wow. A lot to sit with. Thank you all for sharing your personal experiences and connections to questions of safety. Yeah, I'm just taking a moment to sit with that. There was a lot expressed there. But yeah, I'm thinking about, the optics of safety for some can oftentimes and has historically meant material harm for other community members. And so when we think about, the things that we need to see, the changes that community needs to see to keep each other safe, I think that the optics of safety versus real, safety is something that we're all sort of grappling with. I alluded to at the top that prior to joining OPAL, I was a rider ambassador with the Portland Streetcar, and in that job, I was a non-code enforcement presence supporting public safety by doing direct support and outreach with our unhoused neighbors who may or may not be in a state of crisis. And by doing that work in a harm reduction way, we supported public safety for everybody. And so as we think about these programs that sort of, build out our vision for reimagining public safety and thinking about all the ways that that sort of intersects with the transit system is going to be a really important conversation going forward as we try to build up these responses to support a system that supports all of us and serves all of us in an equitable way. So I appreciate all of you sharing that. So my next question now is on the economy, and as we pivot to, like I said earlier, this new normal, and thinking about the impact to workers and families, how does a successful transit system contribute to equity and shared prosperity? Because transportation, like health and housing, is so critical to a healthy and thriving community. So, how do you see the intersection of a vibrant transit system and how that contributes to equity and shared prosperity? And maybe Meg, if you want to maybe start off with this question, Renato, and then we'll come down this way again.
I think that how do we make our community overall a place that people have good jobs and healthier communities is something that we spend a lot of our energy in. And so I think how are those good jobs, as I was saying, that include transportation, especially for workers. A lot of times we'll see, OHSU has a badge pass program where if you work at OHSU, you can get a free TriMet pass. But the janitors who are subcontracted by OHSU to clean the South Waterfront don't have that benefit. If you work at the airport and you are a port employee, you get a badge pass as part of your compensation. But if you work in any of the restaurants, you work as a janitor out there, if you clean the gates, if you're a fueler, you don't have that benefit. So how do we extend those kinds of benefits and put that on employers who want people to come to work instead of on low-wage workers? I mean, I'm proud that we've partnered with TriMet here and all of you to get a low-income pass option, but almost $30 a month is a serious amount of money, and the process to get one of those passes is not simple. If you are in that income bracket and need that low-income pass, you are not going to have a laptop, you do not have Wi-Fi, you are probably not going to be able to, in English, navigate those systems. And so I think the other one thing that strikes me is if people need a discount or a free fare, can we just believe them and trust them and let that happen? And then I think there's inspiration around thinking about how we rebuild our transit system around the workers who did continue to ride it through the pandemic.
Yeah, the issue of economy is very important for us to those who live like paycheck to paycheck, and I wish to see the transit system be so good that people can decide to I'm going to stop riding my car, don't worry about the gasoline prices. And now I'm going to stop using the bus or the train more often because it's more affordable, and also I can go on time to my job, and it's safe. I don't be hurt for anybody, or I don't want to go sick because the contact with because that is one of the ways that a lot of people justify that I don't have to be in close contact with anybody. In my car, I feel more safe, so I'm willing to pay anything for that. So when we have that we are ensured that we're not going to get either sick or harm. That will be better for people those who decide to use it.
Yes to removing barriers to riding the bus. I know it just sounds so simple. I know there's so many things in between, but removing all the barriers is possible. I think when we talk about transit and the economy, there has to be a few other factors in play, and I'm going to keep on going back to the interdisciplinary part of transit. And one of the biggest things that I think has wavered over the last couple of years is, well, more than a couple now. What is time anymore, right? But it's trust. Trust, I think, is such an important factor because, at least speaking from the community that I come from, so Eugene-Springfield, Lane County area, trust will make or break a transit system, even if the transit authority is doing their very best with the resources that they have to put out information. Trust can kill a transit line, trust can demand that transit line. The economy needs, or people existing in the economy need transit to get to work. So therefore, if we want to have a economy that is working well with transit, there has to be better public buy-in to these projects. You know, as Jameson mentioned earlier, in Eugene, we had a city councilor successfully recalled for a few reasons, but one of those was pushback around transit, and that set a really dangerous precedent. And I think it just illustrates the importance of including the public, almost like annoyingly so, like putting flyers in every single mailbox, you know, and it can't just be via email. It can't just be like an online open house that you need like a username and a password to sign into. And it needs to be in a non-jargony way, right? I think the general public, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, is at like a 4th grade reading level. So really just escalating, I think, the jargon around transit and like what is why is it important to have a rapid flashing beacon, and like what is that, and how does that go hand in hand with bus, and not talking about transit as if it exists within a vacuum. The importance of like getting to and from the bus and how that supports the workers in our economy. I have a bunch of friends who are nurses, and I ask if they take the bus to work, and they kind of laugh and say, well, no, because there's not a bus line that comes early enough. You know, I think a friend of mine worked like 72 hours, probably not wanting to, but very often having to rely on other sources to get to and from. I'm getting rambly here, so I'm just going to cut myself off, but yeah.
Thank you all. I've been thinking about this, and transit-dependent people should not be burdened by the cost of using transit. And I think that's a case for many. So we need to do whatever we can as community advocates, government agencies, to prevent that experience. And I think also we have a role in sort of convincing or educating employers about the benefits of subsidizing that option for people, what it can do for, you know, traffic, what it can do for the health of their campus. And I think as a transit rider, I just find the beauty in sitting next to someone and like sparking up a conversation or building a relationship with the driver. And actually, before I forget, I just was hoping we could all just sort of give a round of applause to all the transit drivers across the state right now working, right? Seriously, they're amazing, amazing people. And so, and I think making sure that we're connecting with them and bringing them to the decision-making tables as we start to think about the needs in the community.
Wonderful. Wow, thank you. Meg, I just really loved what you said there, you know, the intersection of economic vitality and transportation. You know, I feel like the conversation around at that intersection has been like, oh, how do we get more people to come back to transit? And I feel like it's a much different conversation to this and say, well, no, how do we, you know, how does our transportation system serve the needs of people who, by necessity or choice, kept riding transit despite the public health concerns, right? People who may not have had a choice, right? And Claire, everything you said about, you know, building trust by meeting community members where they are and addressing those needs in that space, you know, I think that is a gap that we are certainly working on bridging. And yeah, Andre, like, oh my gosh, yeah, it's so good. So we started off this morning talking about vision and hearing from our transit officials talk about vision and challenges for the future of transportation here in Oregon. So I want to sort of bookend this morning by also ending on the question of vision and digging deep and just thinking about, you know, what a successful transit system looks and feels like and how that intersects with your work. Like, what is your vision for like the perfect transportation system, and how does that intersect with your work? So we'll go Andre, and then we'll come back down this way.
Awesome, I appreciate the question. Envisioning questions give us the opportunity to imagine a reality that doesn't exist. I think for me, it is sort of back to what I was first talking about. It is really a suite of options where I could start my morning not knowing how I'm going to get to work and know that whatever option I take is going to be reliable and will get me there on time. And I also have this vision of a premium experience for people using transit. I think right now we're in sort of this era where people are like, oh, it's pretty sketchy. Like, I don't know if I want to do it. I think there's this perfect space in between where you can get transit dependent folks and choice riders, the people that have the privilege to choose, and get that perfect space in the middle where it's just a wonderful experience for everyone using it. I'll do a quick shout out. I really want to see Wi-Fi on our transit network. Like, I want people to be able to work on their, I mean, not necessarily do whatever they want to do on their way, you know? I think that's awesome, and I think we should, you know, invest in that as well. So that's some of my vision.
I'm definitely going to use that in my conversations about like what you said about just not having to think about how you're getting to where you need to go when you walk out of your house. I think that would be a really great indication that there's a transit system, transportation system, whatever word we're using these days, that serves people so much that like they don't have to go through intense trip planning. I personally have trouble with like retaining details and like trip planning, and so like the lowest effort thing is usually what I go with a little caveat that I live on a bike path pretty much, so I just hop on my bike and go where I need to go. But I guess I just want to say, like, in terms of like envisioning the future of transportation system that we need, I mean, I want folks to think about transit in terms of like, transit doesn't just serve people who take transit, it serves everyone. And honestly, transportation is a human right. I'm trying to find a little piece in my notes here. Opposition claims that empty buses mean that people are not riding transit. We know that that's not true, or else I would use the same argument when I see empty streets, and I would say, well, people aren't driving cars, guess we shouldn't repave these streets anymore. Freedom to choose mobility options belongs to the people, and transportation is a human right. The privileged vocal opposition can't take that away from us, but I think that it's going to take all corners of influence on transportation to make that clear. And when I say all corners of transportation, that includes everyone from, unhoused advocates to city council and mayor. There are a few mayors and city council members I would love to see in this room. I think they could really benefit from this whole conversation. Maybe they're tuning in, I don't know. Fingers crossed. But just breaking down all of the silos, and so people understand that transportation and transit is not just something happening in the background, but it's very much part of our lives. It's kind of like the glass shattering moment. I don't know if anyone else here has ever watched How I Met Your Mother, but there's a episode where like the glass shatters and then like one of the characters can't like unsee something after that. That's how transportation has been for me personally, and I try to shatter that glass for like every conversation I have. Like, have you ever thought how expensive car insurance is? Have you ever thought about how much you could save by, investing in an e-bike or seeing if you can take the bus instead? But people need to be met where their needs are. I'm specifically thinking of a neighbor of mine, an older woman who would love to take the bus, but the nearest bus stop to her house, and for Eugene folks, this is on Railroad and North Polk. I'm pretty sure it's uncovered. There's not really a comfortable seating area. It's in a place where people love to zoom their little vehicles around the corner very quickly, even though there's like a 15 miles per hour sign. Anyway, it's gonna take all kinds of folks from every corner to fix transportation systems. That's gonna be ongoing. There's not gonna be a magic solution.
I love the visions. And I guess one thing I think about is imagining a future where for working people, their commutes are less instead of getting bigger. As we're gonna reimagine our urban core, here in Portland and really across the region, how do we imagine that as a space that working people can move back to and closer to where they're needed to work instead of further out, to be able to take that time back. And to some of the things that you all shared too, is that there are space to sit and rest and be covered, to be out of the rain, which, Renato has talked a lot about the weather, and that we feel safe having our kids walk and bike to school. And it's just not really a thought that we have to think about, that we know that they're gonna get there and get home safely.
Yeah, so something that are very pleasant is to see how diverse have become the drivers, the personnel have been become more diverse now with more minorities being higher, and there is something that really hope they continue being improved on the future, and in order to keep this stay green and beautiful, that is necessary to convince people to use the transit and start using less the cars. So that will benefit the environment and benefit everybody.
That is so wonderful, and I want to echo everything that our panelists shared here today. Like, I want to be able to walk out my door and not have to check when the next bus is coming. I want to board a bus and not have to tap my hop card, just knowing the system is fairless, right? That's my vision. Unless, maybe I'm tapping the hop card to give a tip or something to our operators or something, right? Right? Because they are pillars of the community, and I love seeing our operators every single day. Yeah. And also, like, if I get on a bus and I see a rider in a state of crisis, I want to know that somebody's going to be there to support them rather than remove them from the system. Because as we all have said, this transit system is so core to a healthy and thriving community, and we all have a right to share in that. So I want to thank you all for sharing your voices and your perspectives and your stories with the audience today. I want to thank you all for listening in. So I think that concludes our panel. Thank you, everyone.